Hey everybody, I am back for day 2 of our bonus training. And Zoe wants to say hello. Oh no, she's running away. I was gonna have you meet Zoe, but she's gone. That's okay. Good to see you guys. Once you pop on, go ahead and give me some thumbs ups or some likes, and we will get started. Super excited to go through this with you. Let me open these up. Oh, sorry, I put them in Lightroom. So today, awesome. I see a couple of you guys. Can you hear me and see me? Going to give me a thumbs up in there or a quick yes in the chat would be helpful. Opening up Lightroom and then we'll get started. So yesterday we talked about for our fundamentals training. Awesome. Thanks, Fiona. I don't know why I can see your name. Maybe I have to invite. Oh, but then it goes away. I have to catch it really fast. All right. Anyway, let me. Yes, this is the right one. Okay, perfect. Awesome. Open this up. Change that. Okay, perfect. All right. Hey, everybody. So yesterday we talked about the fundamentals of what makes a technically correct image. Now, remember, the reason that we're doing this, the technically correct image, is we need to know kind of where to start. We need a starting line. We need to know what the rules are before you can break the rules. It's okay to break the rules. I feel like emotion becomes one of the most important untangible pieces of an image that really, the difference between a snapshot and some image that just pulls you in and you absolutely love is often that engagement. But there's a lot of underlying principles that are often there too when we don't even necessarily realize it. I was actually pretty surprised. I pulled some of my favorite images in for this particular one. And I was really actually surprised how many different composition rules that some of my favorite images fit. Because there is like a scientific reason why we like certain things and why we like balance and just our whole universe is made up of mathematics, so there is just this like innate natural balance to certain things, and there's certain times when you can look at an image and you're like, gosh, I like it, but something just feels off. Sometimes it could be the composition or one of these different rules. So I'm going to go through the rules one at a time, and then I'm just going to go through a whole bunch of different images and showcase, because a lot of times great images actually have a couple different composition rules together. So if you guys have questions, you can feel free to put them over there in the comments. There's less of you guys on this one. I could probably get to them and answer them as we go. So I will try to keep up with that. But yeah, let's get started. So this first one is rule of thirds, which is a pretty basic photography composition rule. Here we go. We are using the crop overlay in Lightroom. And if you do O, it's going to take you through a whole bunch of different crops, which is pretty cool. So here's the rule of thirds, which is basically just dividing your image in thirds vertically and horizontally. And you can see like the bottom third is this grass, and then the middle third are the mountains, and the top third is the sky. The dog is perfectly positioned right here. His eyes on this top PowerPoint. It's just a really pleasing composition. It also has kind of the golden ratio too, or just and it brings your eye right over here to the dog. All right, let's move on to this one. So this one is centered, but it's also kind of centered and rule of thirds a bit, because the dog's down here in the bottom center of the image, but also have negative space. Like there is no doubt what your eye is supposed to focus on this image, right? I mean, it goes directly to the dog. So that is really what the key of composition is telling our eyes where to focus. So I'm sure you've seen this where there's an image and there's just a lot going on and you don't know where to focus. Even actually when you looked at my art and inspiration boards and the ones that I have that I love all those different things and there's a lot of things going on, there's still usually a flow to it because our eyes enter an image from left to right and it moves around. And, you're following this and your eyes have a place to settle. So there's a lot of nuances here, but I don't want to get that deep. I'm going off a rabbit hole here. Let's go back to the basics. Rule of thirds, centered. This next image is having pattern or texture, which you can see we have these repeating columns. We also have a very monochromatic, right? Dog's same color as these columns. So it's very pleasing in that term. You can also have foreground interest or depth. These are just tall grasses here in the front. So there are tall grasses in the field. I got a little bit low, so I was shooting through some tall grasses. I made sure the grasses weren't covering up my main subject's face. They were around them, and that works well as well. You can also look for having a frame in a frame. So this one's a little bit, it's kind of foreground interest, but it also creates a frame. Our dog right here, and you can see all of these trees are just creating a frame around her, which just brings your eye. It comes in right here and it's like bloop, and it just, like these things just keep circling it around right back to Abby the Labby, which is the best name for a lab ever. All right, next up is leading lines, one of my favorite things. In this image, you can see the olive trees on both sides just lead right down to the interaction between the owner and their dog. Again, there's no doubt what you're supposed to be looking at in this image. Next up are diagonals and triangles. So I want to do the crop overlay for this one. And a lot of times if we're photographing families or groups, then the one thing you want to avoid is having everybody's head bloop, 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 bloop on a straight line. You want to look for ways to have them on some diagonals. Some triangles are always good. Like you can see here, it's just like they just fit right here along kind of that diagonal triangle gradient. And then go back to this one too. And those diagonals, see, there's just lines down. There's nobody's head. These two are almost straight across, but that's okay because we also have a triangle here from dad to the daughter to the dog to the boy, and then mom to the dog at the bottom to the boy is also another triangle. So having those triangles, we don't want that. Having those triangles is another great way to look at your composition, and your eye just has a place to move around. All right, we also have negative space, one of my most favorite things ever, which just means that there's a lot of negative space, a lot of area that is just showcasing, adding to the story, but doesn't have a lot of stuff going on. You can fill the frame. So this dog's head is larger than life, filling up our frame. Also a great composition. We have the rule of space, which is basically the dog has space to look into this image. Or if this dog was running, he has room to run into the image. So if this was flipped and say it was cropped like this, hold on. It's not going to let me go all the way. But say it was cropped in a way that it was like he's looking right outside the frame. It's just kind of uncomfortable. You're like, well, because your eye goes to his face and then it goes to where he's looking. So you have all this kind of dead space over here. So that's why we want to just keep in mind where our subjects are looking in our images so that we can, make sure they have room to run, room to look. Also, when you're cropping around heads, you don't want to crop too close to the head because that feels uncomfortable. They don't have room to breathe. They don't have room for their head. All right. Next up this is kind of a frame within a frame, or also changing your point of view. So I was right up behind these two, were sitting on steps. The dog was in front of them, kind of shooting through them. Their heads frame the dog's head. It's just a way to see exactly where your eye wants to go. It kind of comes in and goes around everybody and settles right here on this amazing little face of his. So those are kind of the main composition rules. Again, things can be broken, but we are just like scientifically programmed to like certain mathematical equations. And there is certain types of art that is just pleasing to our eye, but we don't even know it. We don't even realize it. So those are just some things to keep in mind. I want to go through a couple other images on here. And just to showcase you, just so you see why it works. If you have any questions, you guys can go ahead and put them over there in the comments. And we'll just keep on cruising. So this one has a whole bunch of patterns, of leading lines, of diagonals, of centered. It has a whole bunch of stuff going on. But I mean, it's one of my favorite images. I think it really still works. So there's a lot of composition rules in there. Yeah, Fiona, go ahead, type it in there. And then, yep, this is repeating patterns, which also work as leading lines. All these lines down here lead to our dogs. And we have some negative space, also rule of thirds. You can see right here is over here on the rule of thirds. This one has really, it's centered, but because of her arms, like your eye comes in right here, comes in on the left, and it comes and it sees her and sees the dog, and then it follows her arm right around here back to the moment between the dog and her. So that's why something like that works. Like you can use your owner's arms as leading lines. And then this is another one with some foreground interest. I don't think this image would be as interesting without the tall grasses. I feel like it would just be too much white and not enough detail in the snow. Maybe if I would have shot it at a higher aperture, because it was pretty wide open. So, so then there's no detail in the snow, where these tall grasses add a little color. They match the color of Rosie's eyes. It just adds a little bit of interest. How do you switch between the different crop overlays? So you turn on the crop up here, and then it's just O. And you can switch through the different ones. So you can see again, like when you go through these, even a fairly basic image like this, I mean, it's going to a rule of thirds, the dog's eyes right there on that PowerPoint. This diagonal, the face is right through a cross section there. And this diagonal triangle section, the dog's right there too. So there's all these pieces that our eye just likes to have it, likes to see it how it is there. So for this little dog, again, same thing. Face comes in over here. You look at the dog's face, your eye comes around, the tail curves, sends you right back here to the dog's face, and that's where you stop. Here's one that has kind of monochromatic. I love this image, it's one of my favorites. Monochromatic patterns in the background, rule of thirds, because he's down here in the bottom corner. I don't know, I just love this image. I love the tones of it, things like that. A lot of times with my images, I like colors, but I also like muted images like this. So a lot of times I will tone down the greens and yellows of especially springtime shooting, because the grass is just so bright where I wanted to have it a little bit more muted. This little puppy, you can see a frame through a frame. I actually shot this at Barca Rica in Costa Rica. This dog had this mesh. He had a medical issue. So this mesh is how he actually breathed. They had a hole like through to his nasal cavity. Oh God, I forgot this poor sweet dog's name. Anyway, they had to put him down not too long after this session, and makes me very happy that she has this wonderful image. But this is just plants. They were down, I was on a porch. They were just over on the other side of the porch, and I just shot through these big green things, or a potted plant that I shot through there. Getting the dogs to stay still. A lot of the dogs I photographed were on leashes. Like this dog was on a leash. I think this one was. Rosie wasn't, but she was really good. Leash. Not a leash. 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 I mean, lots of times dogs are on leashes and we just remove them. Also, that's because a lot of times where I love to photograph are busy areas. So college campuses, cities where there's textures and buildings and things like that, because I really love incorporating that into my work. And it's just not safe to have dogs off leash in those areas because there's just so much activity in cars and things like that. So I shoot on leash almost exclusively unless we're in a big open area and the dog is really solid with their off-leash commands. This little guys are filling the frame. You can see, like, again, you're very obvious subject here in this image. Here's another one with some triangles. You can see all of the dogs in these two make just a great big triangle here. And even how she's sitting, where she put her legs, her knees in a little bit, kind of points in towards the rest. So you come in and your eye just kind of goes right around that circle. Here's another rule of thirds. Advice to photograph a dog that's blind, their eyes aren't clear. Yeah, actually, you like with cataracts, you can, it depends. I ask the owner if they want to take them out or at least tone them down. Some owners want to leave them in because that's how their dog was at the time of the session. Others want to take them out, but we always at least tone them down, and I just do that in post-processing. It's just about like removing the blues and greens of the cataract reflection and just making it a little bit darker, changing the luminance and hue saturation. We have in Hair of the Dog Academy in the post-processing course, like we touch on literally every single thing that you could possibly come across when photographing dogs that you might want to edit out. So there's more details on that there. But it's really just playing the hue, saturation, luminance of those cataracts. Do I use flash for pets, Jenica? Sometimes. Sometimes. Not always. Let's see. This one was flash. This one I had some off-camera flash. Natural light, natural light, natural light, natural light, natural light. Almost all are natural light. Natural light, natural light. This was flash because it was side lit. The sun was coming from over here on the side. You can see where the dog's shadow is. So I use fill flash to get a proper exposure on the dog. We're going to talk about getting expression at the end of the week with our bonus. But I have a whole bunch of tricks up my sleeve, from hunting calls to apps to making whiny dog noises, all sorts of things. We'll talk about more about that later in the week. All right. And then here's another kind of fill the frame, a different perspective, where the dog is just looking up, and owners love these shots because this is how they see their dog so much. It's in their face. I usually do this with wide angle lens. So their face is a little bit bigger than their body. And it's just like, it just highlights that adorable little face that they see all the time. Contrast on black dogs. That's a good question. So black dogs, it's really important to have proper lighting. So most dogs I like to shoot really in soft light. So this was a very overcast day. So it's really easy to keep proper exposure on all the black dog. This was an open shade on the side of the building. This was backlit, but the lighting was very even. So when you have a black dog, if you have more light hitting one part of the dog than the other, it's going to be really hard to get that dog to look reasonable in your editing. So it's all about nice, soft, even light. This is the same location, that other dog, but it's edited a little bit differently. We have a little bit more color, but rule of thirds, pattern in the background, some depth, things like that. Here's another one where the dog is that golden ratio. Hold on. Well, I mean, it's also kind of this too. Here's like a main section and then over to the dog. But there we go. Like your eye comes in and just shoop, loops right around to the dog here. Hold on, losing track. Here we go. Here's another one. The dog's in the foreground. The owners are in the background. So you have foreground interest. So it has depth in your images. It also creates a big triangle between their heads and the dog. And then here's another shallow depth of field. The dog's in the foreground, centered with just an interesting background, monochromatic, filling the frame. I like back button focus. That's my personal favorite. Here we have just some patterns. She's down in the lower right-hand corner, leading lines down to little puppy. And then same thing here. These reins kind of lead back to our owner. So your eye comes in here and you see her face and you go to see the horse. And then these reins just lead you right back here. So your eye's in a loop right here in the middle. We have leading lines here coming from the back, leading to our dog on the bridge. Rule of thirds on this image. A lot of negative space. Let's see, Laura, do you choose the final portrait or does your client, and do you select where you shoot or do you mix it up versus client's choice? So when I'm working with a client, I kind of ask them what they're more interested in, if they want a more natural look or a more urban look, and I'll show them suggestions for both. They can see kind of both in my portfolio. And then based on their dog's behaviors, like if they have a reactive dog and can't be by other dogs, I have some places for both of those things where we won't see very many other people. There's some private property options that I have. So really it's finding out about what their dog's needs are, where they are living, like how far is their dog okay in a car? Do I need to go closer to them? And then what they want to do, like what they want their final images to look like, and then what they're going to do with their final images as well. So are they looking for a wall piece? What room are we putting it in? You know, is it a monochromatic room? Do we want something like this where, you know, there's not a lot of extra color? Where, you know, if we did something like this, it would be too much color in that room. So it's really about just talking with our client throughout the whole process so that I know what they want to create and I can create something specific and custom for them. So this one, some negative space, rule of thirds, a lot of foreground interest here. Again, you can see that I made sure that all this grass that makes it really soft is not going over our main subject right here. Same thing here. We're changing our perspective a little bit. The eye comes in here, goes to our little dog, and her arm, the dog's paw to her arm just keeps circling right around. This is centered, but you also have lots of leading lines, these trees, these buildings, the lines on the building. This line right here is all leading our eye to the dog. This is, I'll talk about back button focus in a second, and Charlotte on Thursday will be able to give you guys a really good back button focus tutorial. So this is a good one. Yeah, your eye just comes in and goes right up here to these two. And, you know, where people are looking and where the animals are looking causes our eyes to look there too. So that's just something to keep in mind as you photograph. We have repeating patterns here, leading our eye right to the dog. Repeating patterns, negative space. Your eye just kind of circles around right here. Same thing, she's looking down to our dog, and then her blue dress just kind of brings our eye right back around to that dog's face. Rule of thirds, we have the leading lines of the fence going right here. It's my daughter and the horse she used to ride in Pittsburgh. Rule of thirds, negative space. Same thing here where people are kind of looking at the dog and it just kind of, you know, the dog's centered, but everything's going down towards the dog. Different perspective. We have a little bit of a leading line. Diagonal is kind of leading to the dog here. But again, the key for these is there is no doubt where your eye should go. It's a funny question. Do you prefer cloudy days? So I live in Charlotte, North Carolina now. I've been here for about 2 years. Prior to that, I spent the first 8+ years of my business in Pittsburgh, and we have about 7 months of clouds. So I shot a lot in clouds. So I have this conversation with my friend Charlotte all the time, Charlotte Reeves, because her style is very light driven and backlit and sunny and gorgeous, and mine is not. And, you know, we wonder how much of an influence where we live has to do with it. If you listen to my podcast with Alicia Zimslowska about finding your style, same thing she said there too. Like where she lived and where she was shooting really influenced a lot of what she created. Yes. Can you explain how to work out which light the photo inspiration is, but also how to work the lens out, please? We're going to talk about lighting tomorrow, so you can hold off on that if you want. I mean, really, hard light is like, this is hard light. Soft light is like this, where there's no shadows. Backlit is where you have a lot of the sun coming from behind. What other types of light are? Those are the main. Like if this was a white dog, here we go. Wait, I have a high key. This would be high key because everything's bright. I don't really have any low key images in here where everything's dark. But yeah, hopefully that would be helpful. And then lens, you might not necessarily know. If you don't know, like you'll know on your work, but if you don't know on your inspiration, that's okay. Should the subject, like a dog, always fill the frame? Be full in the frame? if not specifically a portrait. I don't think so. I mean, this dog's not full in the frame. Or this one. Or this one. These are. He's not. So it depends what the goal is for the image. It can be whatever you want. All right, here's another one. We're framed by the bridge. This one's kind of framed in this like silver thing that was on this building. So it's just keeping an eye as you're taking your image. Like this wouldn't be as pleasing if her and the dog, like this line or this line on the sides where this goes from orange to silver was cutting through her head. It just wouldn't be nearly as pleasing. And her hair is the same color as that wall, so it would kind of start to blend in a little bit. So just keeping an eye on things like that is really, really helpful. And again, here we come in with the tree, sees them, and then, you know, if your eye starts to go over here, these branches just lead your eye right back to the couple and their dog. Just some negative space here, rule of thirds, centered. You know, again, not a lot of extra distractions going on for any of these. You can use owner's legs as a frame. And then one more, just a triangle. So this is was a Christmas present for this little girl's mom. And it was just her and the two dogs, and it's just a perfect little triangle between all of their faces. So that's an easy way when you need to pose people and dogs. Where to crop legs? Is it better to cut a certain area? Yeah, general rule of thumb when you're cropping is not to crop at the joint, to crop not at the joint. So here you can see if I cropped her right at the knees, it would feel weird. But since I cropped her, you know, mid to upper thigh, it works more so. So yeah, that is our composition, little extra bonus training for you guys. Let me open this back up, close that. Oh, hold on. So I don't know if there needs to be homework for this one. I don't think there does. I think, if you guys just want to just look at your work with a, you know, maybe new kind of appreciation of how it's set up and what type of composition you are using. And just hopefully this opened your eyes to some other types of composition and opened your eyes to some things to consider when you're taking your images, and just some little tips to help make them a little bit more impactful. So thanks for joining me. I'll add this to our all access page so you guys can see this bonus training there too, as well as it'll be here on the Facebook group. And see you guys tomorrow for day 3 already. Thanks so much for being here with me. Talk to you soon. Bye, everybody.